Guys, welcome to another episode of Live Q&A, Swim with the Sharks, School of Sharks. My name is Dan Diaz. I am your host, and I am super excited for today's show. As some of you guys are familiar with, we really want to make an effort to bring to the community quality individuals that have really something to share with the community and really want to make it impactful. A couple of housekeeping notes. If you are watching with us, we'd love to hear where you're from. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. However, we're using a system called YardStream or StreamYard or something like that. So you do need to go to the bottom and go ahead and give the software permission to share your contact information. Not your contact information, but your name. If you don't do that, then what will happen is it's just going to show up as like Facebook user or YouTube user whenever you post a question or you share, your comments. So we definitely want to know who you are and go ahead and do that. Also, if you like what you're hearing, please just show a little bit of love and go ahead and like and share to your main social media platforms. We always love the algorithm kind of helping us. So who do we have on board today? Well, before I bring her out, I want to let you know that this lady is a dominant presence when it comes to something very, very specific in real estate investing, which is to coordinate the transactions. Casey Smith, a lot of you might know her. If you don't, you want to get to know her today. She started out in real estate back in 2017 after a few years as a top closer at a construction company out in Dallas. Now, after getting licensed as a realtor, she quickly fell in love with the real estate investing side of things. And she did about 50 deals in her first 2 years doing something super basic, which is door knocking. She quickly realized that there was a gap in the market for skilled transaction coordinators who knew the intricacies of resolving title issues and paperwork involved in getting deals closed. So Atlas Transaction Coordination Services was born out of necessity and out of watching this gap in the market in 2019. As an investor who has sat on every side of the business, she understands how a high-quality TC or transaction coordinator can increase operational efficiency without necessarily having them in-house. Her team has helped scale many investor operations across the nation, touching over 4,000 deals in the last 3 years, with Atlas serving as a listing agent for investors in DFW and investing in rental. Herself, her team manages every type of transaction, including assignments, subject to lease options, wraps, mobile homes, and novations. Guys, without further ado, please welcome the one and only Casey Smith. Please share with the audience about yourself.
I think you did a pretty good job right there. Appreciate you having me on. I love this format and being able to come on here and do this because I get a ton of messages that I can't always keep up with, but I'm pretty active in the real estate world in all ways. So the retail side, the investment side, as well as the operational side and all the little pieces that come into actually getting these to closing. I really feel like there's so much information out there, like even on YouTube, just on sales and creative deals, and it can only take you so far. So I feel like networking and doing these things, especially what you've got going with School of Sharks, is just unreal. It's such a cool opportunity to actually ask specific questions for where you are, whether you're beginning, you've done a few deals, or you're trying to grow. I just think it's a great way to do it. So I'm here to answer any questions just based on the experience I have. But I do work with a lot of people nationwide. So a lot of markets shifting. A lot of people went through turmoil in the last quarter, especially, and we watched a lot of companies as well. So not just the DFW or Texas market, but I'm pretty familiar with a lot of different markets, a lot of different sales strategies and things like that. So I'll answer any questions anyone has.
Perfect. So this is what I want you guys to do. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them on the comments section. And don't forget to give StreamYard permission to share your name. That way we'll know where you're from. Before we get into that, how about if we play a little game of 20 questions? No, Casey, there won't be 20 questions, but let's get to know who Casey is and specifically how you're able to impact the business model and transaction coordination. Let's talk about some of your strengths. What would you say personally are some of your strengths that you're able to bring to the marketplace and have allowed you to succeed in this niche?
Good question. I think my strength is that I have an eye for inefficiency. Actually, I have a pain of inefficiency. So when I see certain operational pieces happening. So, for example, just the simple operation of getting a deal under contract, and then where does it go next, and then after that, what are the things that you're supposed to get done and what are the timelines. When I have a gift to see the inefficiency in that process and be able to kind of stand over it and fine tune it in real time. And basically, a lot of people call that systems and processes, but that's what it looks like. So despite having more of a sales background and mindset and personality and profile, I have this weird ability to also go back and put the steps in place to get me to where I need to go. And so kind of having the discipline to continuously look at my processes and see, where am I getting frustrated? Where am I overwhelmed? Where am I not able, or, to expand capacity? I can hone in on that piece, fix it, and move on. Test it, retest it. So we've just constantly been doing that over the years, and have been able to scale to hundreds of transactions at a time, where a lot of people told me it wasn't possible because there's so many nuanced things that happen in a transaction and there's so many factors. We had to really sit down and look, okay, what are the things that always happen? And what are the things that are anomalies, and what are the conditions of those anomalies? And I feel like that's been a strength of mine. And then I've been able to give that vision to my team to actually execute it. And I think
That
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 applies to anything you're doing in real estate.
it really does. But I'm glad you brought that up, because if you wouldn't have brought that up, I certainly would have. One of the most detail oriented people that I know is probably you. And when it comes to transaction coordination, I would say that's like 99% of the success. It's the paperwork and the dotting the I's and the crossing the T's that are many times missed. And that's
Yeah.
what you're able to catch. We got Bettina, one of the most amazing women ever, extremely
Tina!
talented. Anything she
I
has to
haven't seen
share.
her in a while. She's got a lot going on too.
She does. She does. We're super excited to have her here on board as well. Now, it's not all fun and games. Let's talk about, let's just be vulnerable. What would you say is one of your weaknesses or challenges that you're working with, and that it's still.
Ironically, it's what you just said. So, I am detail oriented, but I think I'm unique in that way, in that you can be detail oriented and you have to be in real estate, because these are legal transactions. And I think we forget that sometimes, that you have to be careful. You have to make sure you do things in the right order. But I also know that when it also requires a communication skill or a problem solving skill, that's when my detail goes to the wayside, right? Because if you're managing crisis in real estate, which is inevitable, you will. Either it's a people problem, it's a legal problem, or it's an info problem. You have to deal with them. That's how we make money. So I would say, when I get caught up in that and I start to get reactive to a transaction, the detail basically goes out the window of my head. But this is why I always have someone behind me to check me. So I know myself really well, and I know that one of my weaknesses is that. So I tend to stack too much on my plate. And then I kind of lose the art of the detail, which is required. So I know myself well enough to put an assistant behind me to catch my pieces and keep me accountable to certain things. But I would say that I tend to let that stuff drop and not remember certain things without having the right checklist in place and people.
Yeah, no, that's super, super, super important for sure. And I'm sure, especially in your line of business, systems and checklists and to dos are super impactful. Let me ask you something. And I know we didn't talk about this, but I recently learned about something called time boxing. Have you heard of time boxing? Do you like it? Do you not like
Like
it? Do you want to
the
share?
concept the
Yes.
concept of it, yeah. So, I'm kind of a weird person. If you try to structure me, I'm going to rebel. I think it's just like in my blood. I don't know what it is about me. And I have to be structured. But what I found works for me is, and here's a perfect example. If you really know yourself well, there's usually two types. There's the type like me that has to say, well, I time block very basic. So I would time block in regards to, for the next 3 hours, I'm doing focused R&D time. Then I'm going to take a break, and then for the next 3 hours. So I have big blocks. And then you've got like people like my operations manager who time blocks every minute of her day. And I always feel overwhelmed when I look at her calendar, because I was like, oh my gosh, I need to take something off of your plate. And she goes, no, 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 no. I need this structure. She goes, don't touch it. And I'm like, okay, like by all means, whatever you need. So I'm a huge advocate for it, because if you are not proactive in your day in real estate, it will eat you alive. You are just going to get call after call after call of problems, and you're not going to get to anything that you did. So I always try to time block the deep thought time around when my phones will ring, so that I can get super focused. And it's a game changer. And if you don't have that kind of structure in your day, you're really going to struggle doing all the pieces that you need to do, because you're going to end up spending all your time marketing, and then the deals are going to start coming in, and then you're going to be reacting to that, and then you forgot to put in the hours of marketing that are going to rebuild your pipeline. So if you don't have a firm set of hours you're putting in, not only can you not get the work done, but you also don't even know what your costs are. You don't know what time you're putting in, or even who to hire, because you don't even know how long it takes to do certain things. So if you want to get out of that hamster wheel and start to actually set a business in place, time blocking, I think, is a perfect way to start, because if you need to know how you're using your time,
Yeah,
it's limited.
I recently kind of learned about it, and I have fallen in love with it over the last couple of weeks because for those of you who don't know what time blocking or time boxing is, it's normally we have to-do lists. So I got to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're kind of scratching them throughout the day. If you eat the frog first, you go ahead and do the bigger things and are more challenging first, and then you go down through your to-do. Whatever you don't accomplish or you finish that day, you move it to the next day. However, with time boxing, it allows you and forces you to dedicate time to things that are necessary for your business, but are not an actual activity. So, for example, if you time box 30 minutes to do strict cold call lead generations, well, you can't do anything else. And you have to do those 30 minutes and that activity that leads to it. I've loved it. I'm
Yeah.
already talking to my staff about migrating from to-dos to time boxing, and we it forces us to set time aside for things that we weren't really even aware that we needed to do.
And your list, I have something called a waterfall list, and my entire team does this. We have this ongoing master list. Anything that pops into your head, you put it on your waterfall list. At the end of every day, you're going to pick what are the things that are absolute priority that I have to stay on top of. And then at the beginning of your day, you pick your 3 priorities and you write them out of your waterfall. That's where your time block comes in. So now I can time block to accomplish this priority type thing. But you're right. If you're not time blocking for the activity, the money making activities, you're not going to build anything. And consistency is the number one problem in this industry. I have very few clients that can actually obtain consistency of contracts. And I think it's just because they're so reactive to their problems, they aren't time blocking and understanding how many hours they're putting into their pipeline every day.
Guys, this is absolutely golden. Do me a favor, show some love. Casey could be doing a ton of other things. God knows I could, because it's a really good golfing day and I could be out there.
The
But if
rain
you guys
sucks.
are getting value, please like and share and tag myself, tag Casey, tag School of Sharks. The algorithm and the online world seems to really love that. Let's talk about a little bit, if it's okay. Let's just go ahead and be a little bit vulnerable, and let's go into story time. I love story time because it seems that a lot of people really only get a lot of the problems and the way we solve those problems through going over the stories that affect your business. So if it's okay with you, I'd love for you to share 1 or 2 stories of how you were able to impact someone's life or change or really impact a family, or you really came in and maybe saved a deal. So the stage is all yours.
Oh gosh, there's so you were looking for like a hero story, not like a Casey almost went to the grave story. That's what we're
Let's
looking
do
for.
both, but first we'll start with hero, and then
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can do Casey went to the grave, and then we resurrect her, if that's all right.
There's so many. I would say my biggest successes came in the foreclosure department, which stopped for a couple years because of COVID. A lot of things were on hold, but as you mentioned earlier, I got started in that. So I would actually door knock these foreclosures, and it was not an easy gig, but it was effective. But with
Pause right
foreclosures,
there. Pause right there.
yes.
You have to talk about door knocking. And this is the reason why, in a recent survey in the group, we found out that about 80% of the audience had not done their first deal, and 95% had only done 2 or less deals.
Mm-hmm.
So Why is door knocking such a phenomenal approach when it comes to really igniting your deal flow and your contracts?
Yeah, I like it because it gets you in front of someone face to face. And if you look, a lot of people ask, what's the best marketing channel? It's the one you stick with consistently because it's a numbers game. And we always say that, but it's true. Now, as technology shifts and the market shifts, different marketing strategies are going to work at different times and they kind of go through cycles. So back in 2017, 18, 19, door knocking was great. Foreclosures were in full swing and you could get in front of somebody. I happen to have a background in sales, going to people. So for me, it was a natural fit, but I also worked at my craft a lot. I wasn't born that way. I had to work really hard at learning sales tactics. And I was also licensed. So I kind of created my own approach to knocking the door, but it got me face to face. And this kind of will wrap into a story. One of the women that I had helped, I mean, this house was gnarly. I'm saying there were, I think there were 45 rats killed in that property. And she would wear like diapers and leave them in the house, like high, like mounds of diapers, and it was just disgusting. But she was clearly in a bad place. And so I knocked on her door. I almost didn't. The door was cracked and I could smell it. And I was also late for something. And I was just kind of feeling like I didn't really want to do this right now. But I was like, you know what? I'm here. I'm going to knock this door. Sure enough, she comes out. She was a little bit off, but the second I started explaining to her options of dealing with the problem, she literally switched. Like I could see it in her face, and I was there in front of her. So it's not like she could just hang up on me or do anything like that. So it was a more personal approach. I was a female, and so she felt probably her guard was a little bit down. And anyway, within 45 minutes, I kind of knew a rough value of the house. She actually knew her numbers, and I always say don't trust the seller's numbers, but the way she was saying them told me she had some awareness of her mortgage statement. And so I knew, I said, well, worst case scenario, I said, if I could at least get you X amount of money, would you want to contract to see if I could help you at least get to a better place? And sure enough, it was a slam dunk deal. She lit up, she cooperated, she was never late for anything. I made sure she showed up if she needed a ride, and she got money out of the deal. So I really liked that experience because, and I had asked her, why did you choose me? I'm sure a lot of people had been calling you. She goes, I turned my phone off because it was just going off like crazy with text messages and voicemails. And people who are going through stressful situations tend to put their head in the sand and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to move. It's depression, for a lack of better terms, with a lot of these sellers. But if you're approaching them as somebody who has the means and the ability to solve their problem, not just I'm buying your house. I never even told her that. I said, well, have you tried this, or this? And I said, well, I could, help you this way. And it worked out. She was in horrible living conditions, horrible. And so I found a place for her to relocate to until she could get back on her feet and she had enough cash to put down on a rental that was clean, get a fresh start without being buried by that mortgage. So that was a fun story for me. I did that one completely myself. I actually ended up wholesaling it sight unseen to a very awesome investor in our community, because he trusted that I had clear title and knew that I would clear title well and that he could just go and sign the deal. And I had good video footage and things like that. So it was a really clean deal. It was my biggest wholesale deal I've ever made. He also made a lot of money on the flip and the seller got money out of the flip. So I love that story because it was a win-win. But kind of circling back to your question about why door knocking, well, right now there's a lot of phone carriers and a lot of rules and regulations that are coming out, DNC lists, do not call lists, and things like that. And a lot of my friends are even getting lawsuits doing mass cold calling and text messaging. So what are they going to do? The worst they're going to do is yell at you, to get off their property. I mean, but you're not at risk of doing any of the other marketing channels. And so few people are like confident enough to do this that your competition is in half because there's not a ton of people door knocking, especially after the last 2 years when foreclosures weren't really a thing. And it's just consistency and it's a numbers game. I would hit probably 20 to 25 doors a day, maybe 5 or 6 days a week. And I would plan routes and pull the lists and I would just circle back. I would leave. I created a detailed hand note that I would leave with them. And sometimes there were stacks of notes. Sometimes there weren't. But there's a lot of different things you could do to get a competitive edge. And that was one that worked for me.
So, guys, did you catch that? Because so much value is just poured. One of the things that I really don't want y'all to miss is she said it like in 5 seconds, and it was totally meaningless to her, I'm sure. but she really reflected the organization behind it. 25 to 30 doors a day, 5 days a week, plan a route, be consistent. I
Yeah.
wish I could say that successful people are successful because we're the smartest, we're the richest, we're the most well connected. No, it's because of organized consistency that you're able to do what you're able to do. Oh man, I love that story. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. What else you got? Show us share a really bad story where you almost died. I'm hoping the story is figuratively, not literally.
Man, I would say my craziest story, and actually what shifted my business model, kind of helped me focus a little bit more, kind of sit back and reevaluate my marketing, because I always like the saying, what got you here is not going to get you there. I always, Lori Graymont has this great saying that is, what got you to, like, every zero you add is going to be a new level for you. And so we must have lost 3 deals in 1 week, and it was various reasons falling apart. They were all wholesale deals at the time, and they were all the most random things. But one of them in particular was an elderly woman who had family. She had a heart condition, and she was going to be relocated to a living facility so that she could be closer to the hospital to get treatment. So we contracted, spoke with her kids, everything was great. We had a buyer. This was over in Sherman, kind of out in the boonies. And sure enough, the day we send over the mobile notary, there's this rogue nephew that shows up and decides he doesn't want the family home to be sold and pulls a gun on the notary. True story. And so this notary is calling, panicked, and just like obviously shaking, isn't going to follow through with the deal. And of course, we're like, leave the property immediately. And we never heard from them again. We tried to reach out to them. We did file a memo on the property. It's probably expired by now. I don't think they ever sold it because we would have known. But that was probably a $20,000 wholesale deal that just went down the drain in seconds because a family member came out of nowhere and threatened
With a gun.
physically, and there's safety issues, and the poor notary was shaking, bless her heart, especially these notaries that aren't used to going to investment deals. And that was a tough one. We had a couple other deals fall out that week, and I think it was over $70,000 worth of fees we were expecting that did not come through. And at that point, it's like it was such a lesson of, and then this is the part where I almost died, was losing
Oh
out on that
no.
cash. But it's just that you expect that income to fuel your marketing for the next week and to like get you going. And when you can't count it until it's sold, because there are so
Had
many
you
things that can
mentally
happen.
already spent it? Had you already put it on a
I
budget?
mean, no, but well, I had a partner at the time that maybe wasn't as disciplined in paying attention to that sort of stuff. But now I definitely don't count it until I have it. And I always have contingency plans, and I'm always trying to be 1 to 2 months ahead of all things, because too many of my clients also have this issue of living month to month and just thinking it's going to keep coming. Well, until you can establish that baseline of consistency, and know what the worst case scenario is, you got to be careful, because as a transaction coordinator, I have seen the smallest things blow up a deal. Something as simple as a sibling coming out of nowhere and laying claim or filing a lis pendens on the property that's going to tie it up, or a contractor that came to fix some things before you sold it and decided to file a mechanics lien, and now you're clouded. I mean, there are so many things that can go wrong. So you got to know what to expect, what can hold you up. And half of it is sales and communication, and the other half of it is just technical problems that happen.
For sure,
So
for
yeah,
sure.
I've seen it all. Lots of things blow up deals.
Now, a lot of people who could be listening, they're probably just starting out or they don't have a whole lot of experience. They're probably thinking, oh, yeah, transaction coordinator. I'm sure one day I will be at that level where I need to hire someone like that. That'll probably be the same year that I occupy the whole floor of the seventh story of one of the buildings downtown. So it's really, really far in the future in their minds. But I really want you to
Hmm.
talk a little bit about the importance of bringing, perhaps very early on, a transaction coordinator. What's the value? What are the options that they can kind of choose? And
Yeah, this is
what's,
a
what's Yeah, what's the
Great
value?
question. I get asked this a lot. I actually have people reach out to me and say, oh, someday I'll get to a level where I can use you. Trust me, you can use me on deal one. What's great about a transaction coordinator, especially a third party or somebody who's not actually hired by you, meaning, you're either a 1099 them as a contractor or they're an employee of yours. If you hire a third party service to handle these sorts of things, it's great because you can just pay per deal. Then there's no hourly cost. There's no like minimums or requirements of contracts that you have to have hiring a third party service transaction coordinator. You can just actually just whatever the fee is that they're charging, which can typically be, a few hundred up to 1,000 on commercial, just depending on what kind of deal it is. You can just take it out of your assignment fees right on the HUD. You can even pass it to your end buyer if you're assigning. That's become very, very common. A lot of my clients do it. So they'll say, hey, I'm assigning this deal to you. You assume all costs. This is just a transactional fee for getting clear title and making sure everything's in order for you to take over the deal. So you can hire it day one. And here's the thing. If you're someone who wants to learn how to transact a deal, just to see the experience of it, go through one or two of them on your own. Go for it. But if it is more sensitive things like a foreclosure or something a little bit more technical, like a novation deal or a creative deal, which you are really good at, Dan, then you probably want a coordinator to back you up to make sure that who knows these types of deals so that they can say, hey, do you have that piece of paper that the attorney needs? And you're like, what piece of paper? So it can easily be somebody to help guide you as you're learning. So it really just depends on what you're good at and what you're not good at. I know lots of investors that are very detail oriented that like to do this work at first, but then realize that, hey, I can trust somebody to do this. I need to go build my business, get more leads, work on my business, do several other things. And this is one of the easiest positions to outsource because it's just when you get the deal. So you don't have to worry about hiring someone like acquisitions that has to, kill to eat. They can go out all day every day and they get paid out of the deal too. But at least somebody can be there that can help guide you through the technicalities of it. So no matter how big or small you are, I think it's a good person to have in your corner because there's so much to learn already. Do you really want to learn the details and ins and outs of title commitments and what you need to do to clear an affidavit or an incorrect deed that was signed? Hire someone that knows that stuff because that is a skill set that you're going to have to be in that position because, like I always say, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know to ask the right questions, you might be missing something altogether and then be on closing day and delay the deal by a week or two because you forgot that one thing.
Yeah, 100%. Totally love that. We have a Facebook user comment. I love you, Facebook user. I don't know who you are, but thank you for sharing. Hiring Casey and her
Heart
team
mystery.
is absolutely priceless. You can't put a price tag on her expertise and
Well, thank
knowledge.
you for the love, whoever you are. Honestly, it's someone I've worked with.
Yeah, probably. You got to give StreamYard permission to let us know who you are. Let's talk a little bit about. So we talked about how or when a transaction coordinator could be brought on, which could be at the very first deal. I think I do agree with you. In order to value what someone like you brings to the table, you got to go through hell yourself a little bit. But I think quickly, you'll learn the value of it. What are
Yeah.
some of the things that you or your office or your staff have done to actually positively impact financially a deal? Share something with us that you're like, okay, well, there was this deal and this happened and this would have been the outcome, but we did this, or we discovered this, or we figured
Yeah.
out how to do that.
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember a really good one, and I don't transact as many myself these days, but I have done thousands of them. One deal actually, and this maybe isn't the best example, but it is one. We had a situation on a deal in Michigan where, um,
I hate Michigan.
it's not the
I like
worst,
kids
but
there.
they have really good prices over there. I'll tell you that. But it
Yeah.
is a lot different. But we had this situation where my client was assigning a deal to an end buyer, and this seller who I was in contact with told me all his stuff was off the property. Now, Never trust their word. Trust but verify. Obviously, this is a remote transaction. And so this buyer, I just relayed the information. However, I told my clients, you might want to go check this. But at the end of the day, it was the end buyer's responsibility to do so. And so this end buyer had ended up signing everything, wiring the funds and everything. The second I'm getting the funded notice, this buyer calls the title company and the attorneys and says, halt everything, do not record my deed, do not release my funds, and reverse the transaction. So my seller, my client, would have lost a pretty decent fee. So before I called my client, and this is because I know them well, and I knew that the buyers well, I had built rapport with them over the several weeks. I called the seller first, and I said, "Hey, what's going on? What's the situation?" He explained he had stuff in just the garage. I said, "Okay, hold on. Now I know his situation." I got estimated timelines. How long would it take? What was his situation? Then I called the end buyer, and I said, "Hey, what's the deal?" I said, if I can negotiate this, would you be okay releasing it if we just get an extension just to see where he was at? And then after I got his temperament, which was angry, and he didn't want the liability of someone's stuff being on the property, he was just going to throw it out. He said, well, see what you can do and call me back. I then called my client and I said, okay, I've spoken to all parties. Here's our situation. I can tell the end buyer is about to pull out if we can't give him a firm answer. Anyway, that got my client to go into hyper mode. They ended up hiring a truck themselves, going over there and helping the seller move what they needed to move to keep the deal alive. We lost a week. It was a lot of stuff, and I negotiated. The guy didn't want to do the deal. I even said, well, what if I can negotiate a little off the price for time? My client did not like that, but he took it anyway because he would have lost altogether. So it wasn't like I increased his fee on this one, but I did save it for him because he would have completely lost it, not knowing what was going on fully and just assuming that it was a deal done. Had they not had somebody like a transaction coordinator in the mix of that and understanding the temperaments of the people involved and coming up with solutions proactively, they probably would have lost it because it did take some time. I also went to that title company and had a conversation with the attorneys to figure out how they could possibly do that when things were already signed. That's another conversation, but this is why a good title company and attorneys and doing the right thing is important because they signed. And at the end of the day, they didn't walk the property and that's kind of on them, but that's a gray area. So we saved the deal for them and we have saved several deals just by having the right conversations and asking the right questions when it comes to people problems and understanding, to some people that wouldn't have been a big deal. It was just, oh, it's just in the garage. Let them come get it later. You're working on the main house anyway. But they didn't want the liability. They were a larger company and they had different rules. So you have to know your buyers really well when it comes to these types of deals as well. What are they willing to risk?
And it
What are they
wasn't
not?
a totally, both sides of the equation. Neither one of the sides was a terribly unrealistic, request or situation. So I can totally
Yeah.
get it. We've got a really good question, despite the fact that Facebook user says it's a pretty dumb question.
I
But
have no dumb questions.
I think this is probably the core of what this live Q&A should be. What is the role of a transaction coordinator? Doesn't the escrow officer do this as part of the closing?
My
Please
favorite
educate
question.
Facebook world.
This is my favorite question, and it's not a dumb question. In fact, I spend a lot of time going out there advocating for this because there's a huge misconception of what a title company is. So, a title company is only responsible for ensuring the sale. That's their job. They're a neutral third party. Their job is to look at all the legal documents in the chain of title and figure out their risk of insuring. This is why when they run title, they come back to you and say it's clear, or no, we need to actually get these payoffs and there's a judgment here, or we need to verify that this is the owner, or whatever the issue might be. It's not their job to clear the problems. That's your job. It's also not their job to communicate to your sellers and your buyers and keep them in the loop or hold their hand or set the expectation of what to expect. So as the investor who's going direct to sellers, you're promising them something. And the title company is just a third party processing it. A transaction coordinator is a lot more valuable in that they're going to be the ones that guide your sellers through the process, make sure they understand what's going on, help ask the right questions if problems do arise, and clear the title and help coordinate. So There's a lot of title companies out there that do a good job of this stuff, but it's not their job and they get overwhelmed because they're not staffed to be able to handle that kind of work. Communication is a huge part of a TC's job. And like I said, they're a neutral third party. So they can't be talking your seller off a ledge. They can't be trying to get your buyer back to the closing table when they decide they want to move on to another deal because it took too long. That's your job. So that's what a transaction coordinator can do from the day it's signed to the day it's closed. They're the ones making sure all the right parties have all the right things, all of the questions are answered, and all the problems are solved, and that everybody is on the same page, because there can be 3 to 15 parties in a transaction. And I bet you the title company's not calling all of them. Like, you need to make sure that you know who's doing what.
Okay, you just kind of glossed over something that I think a lot of people miss. There are 3 to 15 people involved in a transaction. Break it down for us. Who are those parties? How are they related? And how can they affect the deal?
Yeah, so a lot of people think about your sellers and your buyers. Well, if you're assigning a deal, you typically have two buyers, right? There's you and the end buyer. Even then, as you multiple assign, that can go up from there. And you've got your title company and your attorneys. Sometimes those are two people, sometimes they're one and the same. And then those are your major parties. Well, the secondary parties that could be privy to it would be, if you have a lender involved, if you have agents involved, if they're representing a seller or a buyer, which happens quite often. You've got additional heirs to sellers, possibly a point of contact for a seller. If they're elderly, you might have another party speaking on their behalf that you're dealing with, daughters, relatives, things like that. You've got surveyors, you've got appraisers, you've got JV partners that you often work with. And so, as you can see, that can kind of expand from there. So not all of these parties are involved in every transaction, but they can be. We've even had deals up to 20 heirs on one property, and that's 20 people, 20 personalities with needs and desires that you're operating with. And so whenever there's a snag or an issue in communicating with these parties, title company is going to call you and say, fix it, handle it. This is as far as I got. So I probably did not name all 15, but those are the categories of people, and there can be multiple within each category. So no matter how their role is, big or small, you still have to communicate, and there's certain things that they need. My team actually has what we call a communication matrix, where it lists all the documents you would have in a transaction and all the parties in a transaction, and we literally identify who needs what depending on the situation, so you know what documents to give to who and who's responsible for them, because it can get overwhelming.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know we do fairly vanilla transactions, meaning that it's just buyer seller. It's a new property. It requires very little fixing. But guys,
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're buying problems, that's the thing. We only make money when we solve problems. So you got to
It's
know
true.
what to do and how to solve those problems. And it's not just up here. It's how do I put what's up here into practice, and that is where a knowledgeable transaction coordinator is really gonna come into play. Let's talk about, if it's okay. Let's talk about for a minute about someone who is just kind of starting out and trying to figure things out, and they obviously want to bring on board a transaction coordinator, but they either don't have the budget, or for some reason there's just a mental gap where they think, you know what, I'm not ready to bring someone on. A lot of people use VAs. I'd love to get your
Mm-hmm.
opinion on, are VAs good? How are they good? How should they be used? How should they not be used? Let's talk a little bit about
Yes. Great question. I work with VAs first and foremost. So half of my team are virtual assistants. We call them assistant TCs. And that's because I think as an investor role, there's two qualities you need in this person. And they're going to be someone who's a really strong communicator and problem solver, who can kind of think outside the box or know how to influence people, because it's a skill that's needed. The second is that detail work we talked about, which would be, going through the paperwork and making sure the right places are signed, making sure all of the data lines up on the title commitment as well as the purchase agreement, making sure that no paperwork is missing. That's detailed stuff. Knowing the technicalities of who gets the earnest money if it terminates, because people often ask me, well, I thought I got it. Well, let's go back to the contract. So you have a detail oriented and a communication strength that's needed. It's really hard to find that in one person. Now, virtual assistants, they can be really great on the phone, but if a lot of the language skill and their ability to communicate clearly and build rapport and be able to go off script is limited for most VAs that I've dealt with. That's not to say that they aren't out there. It's just a little bit more difficult and requires a lot more training. But what I do find virtual assistants are fantastic about is following protocol. So if you have a list of tasks that they could follow repeatedly, and you can easily show them videos to follow and do examples, and you've already got that built out, virtual assistants can be fantastic. They can be really great as back end for you, where you're still the person communicating, solving the problems, but they can help you with that paperwork, store it in the right places, grab it for it when you need it, maybe set it up in a template for you. All that busy work virtual assistants are good at. I have not had a lot of success in them being able to break script. If something doesn't go well or they need to re-navigate something, I just haven't seen that skill set there. Or there's a timidness and lack of confidence when it comes to them speaking to these parties. So for example, would you trust your virtual assistant to call a lender trying to get a payoff that's late on a foreclosure note? Do they know how to respond when they say no? Because my team doesn't accept no. Like, would your virtual assistant accept it? The culture is typically, oh, sorry to bother you. That's just a cultural thing, and depending on where they come from. And so you have to take those things into consideration. So I like the combination. I like having a stateside person that's really skilled and knowledgeable and leading that position in that role, where you might not have to train them. Maybe they teach you something, and then they have an assistant, a virtual assistant on the backside. If you're somebody who is okay handling the transactional work, that virtual assistant might be a good person to hire first for you. It's cost effective. They can deal with the busy work, get that off of your plate so you can see a little more clearly what you need to do, who you need to hire, and if you doing the transaction work is the best, or if you need to get someone stateside in there. But I'm a very big proponent of having a stateside person in transactional management for investors. It's just too delicate of a skill.
Now you mentioned the word stateside. That might be a new thought or a new word for a lot of people in our audience. What exactly is a stateside person?
Yeah, so I just use stateside as a differentiation between a virtual assistant typically located in the Philippines or Central America or some of the other hubs that they are popular, I can't say that word,
Popular.
recruited from. The Philippines are big. I have about 5 VAs from the Philippines. They're wonderful, amazing people. They do high contract work. They know paperwork really well, but they hate phones. And so I can't really make them transaction coordinators. And the number one question I get from clients running big operations are your transaction coordinators in the States? Are they here on our time zone with our English as a first language with knowledge of real estate? That's actually the top question I get. And all of my transaction coordinators are stateside, meaning they are not virtual assistants. They are employees that are trained and from the United States with backgrounds in that. So it's not, not to discriminate or anything like that. It's just a
Yeah, yeah.
different skill set and a different type of cultural, mannerisms. And here's the thing. You're dealing with people in the United States for your transactions, there is a cultural element there. There is a way of speaking. There is a certain thing that they're going to expect you to know. And so if you hire someone overseas, just make sure they're highly versed in that sort of stuff. And I would argue, and I might get cursed for this, but most people's cold callers who are virtual assistants are pretty awful, and you might not know it, but they don't know how to go off script. I mess with them all the time. I hate to say it. When your cold callers call me because I've got some priorities, I'll usually say something to throw them off just to see how they respond, and they hang up every time.
Yeah.
So similar situation in transaction coordinating. What if the seller's upset or angry? What are they going to say or do? You know?
Yeah.
So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you share that because a lot of people might think, can I offload all of my work, to a VA? And the answer is anything is possible in this world with enough money. That's the answer.
Sure.
But
And time to
and time
train.
and time. But those cultural differences or challenges, sometimes you can't train out of. It is ingrained in their DNA.
Yeah.
It is just a mindset that you will not be able to overcome. So use them for what they're good for. They're great for data. They're great
Mm-hmm.
for, moving knobs. They're great for, small tasks. They're great for a lot of things that deal with a computer and Excel and DocuSign and software. They are just not great negotiators,
Yes.
persuaders,
Yes.
communicators. And that's really
That's it.
where, don't put that on them. You got to take ownership for it, and you got to hire stateside. I learned a
Stay
new word
inside.
today. I learned a new word today. Very, very nice. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about something that I'm super excited about, and the fact that you're going to be joining us for about 3 hours and preparing. You've already prepared a really awesome webinar that focuses specifically on the art of transaction coordination. I'd like to leave a few moments with you so that you can share with the audience what it is that they can expect, when it's going to be, why they need to attend, and really why this needs to be something they need to put on their calendar.
Awesome. So, yes, I would love for y'all to join me for the 3-hour webinar that is coming up Thursday, February 16th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central, I believe.
So
Um,
there it is, the image. There's also
Perfect.
a QR code that y'all can just go ahead and scan. It's got the date, it's got the link, and it is a fantastic special 3-hour webinar, February 16th. I hope y'all got it. Take a picture of it, share it, and now go ahead and share a little bit, Casey. What is it that they can expect?
Yes, so I'm very passionate about this. I think when I was investing or starting with my first few deals, I knew what a transaction coordinator was because I'm also licensed, but it wasn't the same skill set. I tried a few of them from realtor land and they just didn't have that knowledge or that flexibility to learn the problems and navigate them. They didn't want to really problem solve. They just wanted to do the details. Well, I am very passionate about helping you guys understand what this role is. So I'm going to be going through exactly what a transaction coordinator is, what their general skill set is, what they should know. I'm going to go over certain creative deal types, tips and tricks for actually resolving common things like getting payoffs, like getting liens, what questions to ask when and where, because it is an art. I challenge underwriters as well, teach you some of that stuff. So I really want to show you what a transaction coordinator can do, how it can help you get started, and take that huge piece of knowledge off of your plate to figure out. And most people don't really understand what happens after a contract is signed. And so I'd like to walk you through that process, help you understand so that you can do a good job of telling your sellers and setting the right expectation for them. Because I cannot tell you how many times I get a question that says, when do I get my money? And the day after it's signed, well, there's a process to this. And so just having a skilled TC or knowing what the process is going to help you sell deals better or get deals under contract better and know exactly what to do so you look like a professional, even if it's the first deal that you've ever done. So join me. I can answer any questions that you all have. And I'm going to be doing a lot of detailed content, and even down to how to stay organized and how to set yourself up for success. So whether you're doing it or you want to hire someone to do it, come learn everything it entails, and you can make a good decision for what you'd like to do in your own business.
Guys, and I really want to take a moment to say, for those of you who have taken the courses at School of Sharks that we put out, these are highly curated, highly prepared, highly valuable, highly actionable pieces of information. The premise behind School of Sharks really is that to bring quality education to the masses at affordable prices. And that's part of the reason why we do courses like this. If you buy this course after the production date, the cost will be $297. However, if you buy it now, the live option is only $97. The recorded, I think it's like $149. So you get the opportunity of getting it half price. Plus, you get the opportunity, because Casey is going to be teaching it live, for her to answer your specific questions, and you won't be able to do that on the recording. So guys, please take advantage. Very limited seating. Mark your calendars, and make sure you guys take advantage of this course. Again, I'm going to go ahead and put on the screen the website, as well as the QR code, or you can go to schoolofsharks.com to go ahead and make sure you're locked in for that course. Hit me up on the DM, hit Casey up on the DM. We really want to take care of you guys, and we do this so that we can all learn together as a community. Casey, we've taken up a lot of your time. We really do appreciate it. We do have one more question, and this is kind of a given, but it's a good question. How much does a transaction coordinator cost? And you can either share your cost or you can share industry cost. Makes no
Yeah.
difference to you.
I'd say it's pretty typical for an investor TC because of the amount of things that we do, which is a little bit more than a realtor, is anywhere from 500 to 800 on average. I've talked with lots of different transaction coordinators in my field, and I just heard of one recently costing 1,000 to 1,200 just for an investment deal. So, and that's typically because there's no agent there to communicate. They're the ones communicating on your behalf. They're your point of contact after you get it signed. So that takes the burden of that communication off of you. So that's the general cost. And yes, the escrow officer is not supposed to clear title. They might guide you and help you, but it's not really their job. And I have a lot of close friends that are escrow officers, and they love my team and my company because we'll come in and actually do the work, and it's refreshing to them. But anyway, that's pretty much what it costs. It's a small fee out of a wholesale fee to pay without the liability of having them in house and having to pay hourly and when you don't have deals coming in. So per deal cost, usually taken out of closing. They'll send the check directly from title company. You don't even have to account for it. It just comes out of your deal. So it's a really simple way to outsource.
Very nice. Guys, if you got value out of this, please do me a favor. Like and share to your social media outlets. Go ahead and tag me, Gancito, on social media, Casey Smith, School of Sharks. Go ahead and lock in your seat. It's only $97. You know what, guys? If you take the webinar and you truly, genuinely feel you did not get at least $97 for it, we'll get your refund. I mean, is that okay? Whatever it takes. We need to get you on that feed. So
I'm confident enough that you'll learn something and it will be worth it. I
oh,
promise.
without a doubt, without a doubt. So thank you so much, Casey. We do appreciate it. You guys have a great one. I'm going to go ahead and leave on the screen the QR code for the course. And I hope you guys have a fantastic and a super prosperous first month of 2023. You guys have a great one. Take care. We'll see you, Casey.
Thanks.